As we continue in First Timothy, we we look back and we see that Apostle Paul is telling Timothy about the false teachers, about the qualifications for elder, about the qualifications for deacon, about living a godly life, about false teachings in the city of Ephesus and among the church in Ephesus. And then we get to chapter 5, and the Apostle Paul tells Timothy, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters in all purity. The word rebuke in the Greek, in the Hebrew, the word rebuke in the Hebrew, it actually means to strike upon, to chasel, to sharply rebuke. It implies a severe, harsh, or abrupt correction. So in context of First Timothy 5:1, Paul is telling Timothy not to sharply rebuke older men. But when he says to encourage them, sometimes this is translated as to exhort them. The meaning behind that word in the Greek for encourage the older man is to either call alongside, to encourage, to exhort, to comfort, to urge. You're urging somebody. So this suggests of a gentle, supportive approach, building up rather than tearing down. This verse, First Timothy 1 or First Timothy 5:1, Apostle Paul tells Timothy to appeal to older men as he would to his father with respect and encouragement. What Apostle Paul is not telling Timothy is that when you see an older gentleman who is part of the church and they are members of the church and they are maybe they're a deacon in that church and but they're older than you and you want to show respect to them, but you see that they have done something evil in the sight of the Lord, you're still supposed to go to them and bring correction, but in a way that's respectful. That's what verse 5:1 says. Now, a lot of times you do this, and people get all offended, and they call you judgmental, or they don't even listen to what you have to say, or they want to just turn the script back on you. That's between them and God. You did your job, you went to them, you were respectful about it. There's nothing that you can do at that point. But when you see people in the church, an older woman, an older man doing evil in the sight of God, you have a responsibility, especially if you're a leader in the church. You have a responsibility to go to them in respect and call them out on it in a respectful way, in a way that's not tearing them down but building them up. There's only one verse that the Apostle Paul says this in chapter 5, which I find interesting because he just got done talking about the qualifications for overseers and deacons and for pretty much bunch of man positions within the church. There's a difference. God has given a role for both genders. But then he starts talking about widows. And it's kind of interesting what he says. So he says in verse 3, honor widows who are truly widows. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them learn first to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents. And that word return, it means either a reward or a repayment, a reward or a repayment to their parents. So if you're a woman, you're single, you have little kids, you're still taking care of your kids, you're not biblically qualified to be a widow and to be taken care of by the church. Your job as in that position as a widow with your kids is to make sure that you bring honor and a good return, a repayment to your parents through your kids. Your kids are now your responsibility to bring a good return, a good repayment to your parents, because your parents look at your kids as their, um, their offspring, their reward. They want to know that their grandchildren grow up to be productive members of society. But especially if you're Christian and you have grandkids, you want to know your grandkids will grow up to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind and serve Him day and night. Nothing more brings joy to a Christian grandma and grandpa than to know that their grandkids accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior and that they're going to go to heaven for eternity. And so when they die, they will see them again one day. So it's your responsibility as a widow that when your husband dies, your kids become a repayment and their lives and the way you raise your kids become a repayment to your own parents. And this is what it goes on to say, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. In the sight of God, you as a widow with kids, you have a job to do, and that's to raise your kids up in the Lord. And for this is pleasing in the sight of God. Now it goes on in verse 5. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God and continues in petition and prayer night and day. Apostle Paul is Jew, and he doesn't say day and night, he says night and day. In the Jewish tradition and the Jewish world, even to this day, a day starts with the night. That's why in Genesis, day one, it goes there was evening and there was morning. Well, right here it says there's night and there's day, evening, morning. The a day in the Jewish time period or in the Jewish culture or Jewish religion, a day starts with the evening or with the night. And you see the same thing going on right here is the Jewish side of the Apostle Paul comes out when he writes down night and day. So with petition and prayers, night and day. But she who is self indulgent is dead even while she lives. So the job of a widow that is truly a widow is to serve God and to place her life in a position where she is all for God. It's kind of like being single. I'm single. I hope I get married one day. I hope. I mean, I'm 32 now and I'm still single. I mean, I joined the Marines. How come no one wants to take me? I will protect you. But the job of somebody that's single is technically to serve God 100%, to have your mind and your focus 100% on God. Now you become a widow, and guess what? You have your mind and your mindset and your will 100% focus on God. You're serving in the church. You're doing things that glorify God's name. And so when it says she is self-indulgent, it means that she's doing things that glorify herself. So as a widow, your husband's out of the picture, your kids have grown up. It's time for you to step back into the service of the Lord. Command these things as well, so that they may be without approach. But if anyone does not provide for his own relatives, especially for the members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. It's kind of a weird verse that Apostle Paul is talking about widows and taking care of their kids and raising them up in the Lord. But then he moves on and talks about widows that are all alone. And then when he's talking about widows that are all alone, then he's talking about if anyone does not provide for his own relatives, especially the members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. He's talking about widows when he's saying that verse about providing for your own household. He's telling the widows, hey, you need to provide for your own kids. It's not your season yet for the church to step in. It's not your season yet for the government to step in. It's not your season yet for other people to step in. It's your season for you to step in. And he's telling this to a widow, to a woman with kids, a single mother, father died, saying, it's time for you to step up and do what you are being called to do, not by the church, not by the Bible, by God. For this is pleasing to God. If there's a New Testament passage that promotes women having a job and providing for their family, it's right here. It's right here. Verse 9. Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years old, having been a wife of one husband. This talks about the enrollment of widows that get help by the church in the first century church. So I guess there was, you read in Acts, there was a commission created in Acts to take care of the widows. And this is the requirements is that they had to be 60 years of age, that they lived a life where they only had one husband, having been the wife of one husband, having a reputation for good works, brought up, if she had brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of saints, has cared for the afflicted, and has devoted herself to every good work, but refuse to enroll younger women, for their passions draw them away from Christ. They desire to marry, and so incur condemnation for having abandoned their former faith. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, not going about from house to house and not idling, but also gossipers, busybodies, saying what they should not. So I would have the younger widows marry, bear children, manage their household, and give the adversaries no occasion for slander. For some have already strayed from after Satan. If any believing women have relatives who are widows, let them care for them. Let the church not be burdened, so that it may care for those who are truly widows. We are in a season in the United States of America where a lot of people are saying, oh, the church needs to step up and we need to raise taxes and so everyone can get food stamps because people want to stay home and not work. The Bible literally says right here in First Timothy chapter 5 that widows are only widows if they're 60 years old and they have no one and they lived a God fearing life and they only had one husband. The sad fact about it is that most women in the church of today in 2025 went through life getting married to multiple guys and going through multiple different divorces. And because of that, they disqualify themselves from being a widow from a biblical standpoint. Kind of crazy. What I think is crazy is that the Apostle Paul is telling younger women if any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let her care for them. It doesn't say if anyone has, if any man has relatives that are widows. It says if any women have relatives that are widows, let them care for them. This is just like Ruth. Ruth, the book of Ruth. You had Naomi and you had Ruth. Naomi lost her sons and her husband, and she became a widow. And one daughter-in-law goes back to her own people. But Ruth said, "Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. Where you die and get buried, I'm gonna die and get buried." It shows this faithfulness. It shows this incredible faithfulness. And guess what? The Apostle Paul is telling Christian women, as followers of Jesus Christ, and this is a requirement if you profess to believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and your Savior. This is also very similar to the book of Ruth because the Apostle Paul tells widows that are young, hey, go get married, go have kids, take care of your household. Just like in the book of Ruth, Ruth found Boaz, got married, had kids, took care of her household, and she had a job. Ruth had a job, and she took care of her mother-in-law, the widow, the true widow. So this is a very Jewish teaching that we're reading right here in First Timothy. But the interesting part is the Apostle Paul is Jewish and he's putting down like you can see the Jewishness in the text when he says night and day, and then he starts talking about widows and young widows and old widows. It looks a lot like the Old Testament story of Ruth. But it looks like the Old Testament coming back alive, being upgraded in a way that helps Christians who are now following the Jewish Messiah, Jesus Christ, know how to live whenever you lose your husband. How do we relate to one another? Very, very interesting.